This is NBC Nightly News, Friday, October 26th. Reported by John Chancellor with David Brinkley's Journal.
Good evening. It looks tonight as though there may be both Russians and Americans in the Middle East to observe the ceasefire. Soviet Party Chief Brezhnev said today that his country is sending representatives, an unusual designation in this kind of situation. And the United States said it would send unarmed civilians if asked to by the United Nations. But the American government maintained its position that it would be better if no big power observers were sent to the ceasefire lines. In the meantime, the big American military alert is being reduced. 36,000 men have been told to stand down, but over 2 million remain on alert status, including the nuclear bombers of the Strategic Air Command. In the Middle East, there was some fighting in the Sinai Desert, but by and large, the ceasefire is being respected, and some UN observer troops have already arrived. The Egyptians say the Israelis have broken the truce, and the UN Security Council will meet again tonight. But the main news of the day was Brezhnev's disclosure that Russian representatives were entering the picture. George Montgomery has more on that.
Brezhnev came to address the so-called Congress of Peace-Loving Forces after a day of international tension. The meeting in the Kremlin's Palace of Congresses was braced for something big. What it got was apparently not big and apparently not alarming. It got Brezhnev's announcement that what he called Soviet representatives had been sent to the Middle East.
Такой курс не принесет и не может принести Израилю.
Brezhnev said the Soviet representatives would observe the fulfillment of the patchy ceasefire. Evidently, they were not the troops Egypt had wanted. Brezhnev gave no details, but diplomatic sources close to Brezhnev's government said they understood that only about 100 Russians in civilian clothes had gone to Egypt as observers. Brezhnev's tone was moderate. He discounted American reports of Soviet troop movements toward the Middle East, but he stressed Russia's desire for better Soviet-American relations. George Montgomery, NBC News.
Reuters news agency reports from Cairo that sources there are saying 70 Russian representatives have already arrived. In Washington, there was support for the president's actions in ordering the American military alert. Senator William Fulbright, often a critic, praised the administration's decision. Here's more on the day in Washington, beginning with a report from Richard Valeriani.
The State Department suggested that considering the present situation in the Middle East, it would be better if neither Americans nor Russians were truce observers. However, a spokesman said that if the UN Secretary General is agreeable to some participation by the two superpowers, then the United States will go along. This position required some diplomatic tightrope walking, since the U.S. has been a member of the Middle East Truce Observers Team ever since it was first organized in 1948, and there are 8 American observers there right now. For the Russians, this will represent their first legitimate presence in the area. The arrangement appears to be part of a deal between Washington and Moscow, permitting the Russians to become truce observers as long as they did not insist on taking part in the new armed peacekeeping force. Richard Valeriani, NBC News at the State Department.
Details were released today on what the Soviets did to prompt the U.S. military alert. Late last week, Moscow placed 40,000 airborne troops stationed at bases in the southern Soviet Union on an alert. At the same time, Soviet transport planes in Eastern Europe were possibly preparing for a troop airlift to the Mideast. The Soviet fleet in the Mediterranean almost doubled in size to 85 ships. But even so, at the Pentagon today, it was revealed that what finally triggered the U.S. alert was not military. It was a sudden hardening of the Soviet diplomatic position, which came last Wednesday night. Defense Secretary James Schlesinger defended the alert, but stressed the administration's desire not to damage relations with the Soviets.
The episode